If you are an online business owner, I have a stark warning for you. Visa is changing the rules of the game when it comes to chargebacks. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about what is going to be changing and how it's going to impact your business, because it will be changing quite a bit. My name is Maria Spragas. I am a payment processing expert, and I help thousands of 7- and 8-figure merchants navigate the waters of payment processing. And today, as I mentioned, I really want to talk to you about what Visa is changing and how it's going to impact your business. Now, every time I talk to different business owners about chargebacks, the magic number they think of is 1% or 100. And that has been something that Visa has touted for a long time. Like, you cannot go over 1% in chargebacks or 100. Basically, you'd have to breach both. And that's pretty much been the unwritten or unspoken rule. It has changed a little bit. Like, Visa did make it 0.9% instead of 1%. But in general, the guideline was don't go over 100 chargebacks and don't go over 1%, and you should be okay. Now, what is Visa going to be doing? Visa is creating a program called VAMP program, which stands for the Visa Acquirers Monitoring Program. So, I mean, that's irrelevant for you guys, but they had other programs through different names, and now they've basically decided they will no longer have these different types of ways that they're going to calculate chargebacks, or whether you breach or whether you have fraud and so on and so forth. They're just going to have this one big program, and all merchants have to abide by this program. I mean, the main thing that's important here is that they're streamlining the process, because I do have to say, working in payment processing for many years, it could get quite confusing for business owners to understand, like, how many fraud chargebacks, how many non-fraud, what is the ratio? Is it this month's transactions, last month's, and so forth? So this is actually just going to simplify things a little bit, although it's going to make, chargebacks and fraud a little bit more of a burden for merchants. So it is important for you to understand what is going to happen. Now, one thing to note is that this has started already in Europe. In Europe, Visa has already rolled out these rules, and they're going to kind of see how everything goes in Europe, and then they're going to be rolling it out to North America later this year. Now, as I said before this, Visa would categorize chargebacks and disputes into two categories: fraud and then all the other reasons. And fraud was regarded as more serious. If you had more fraud chargebacks, then you may get penalized more than if you have non-fraud chargebacks and so forth. This new regulation, this new rule, is basically all chargebacks, all disputes fall into one big category for them to review. Now, there's a few new things here. So Visa has decided to make the threshold be 1.5% of a business's transactions. So what that means is you can have up to 1.5 of your transactions that are chargebacks or disputes. It's actually the same thing. Stripe calls them disputes. Other processors call them chargebacks, but you can have 1.5% of those regardless of the reason. So as I said, whether it's fraud or service not delivered, or, some kind of dispute on a defective item, it all kind of goes into one basket, and you're not allowed to have more than 1.5%. And this is actually going to be changing, because they're saying as of January 2026, when they've fully rolled out the program in pretty much worldwide, this number is going to go down to 0.9%. Now, the calculation to this is very simple. It is the number of disputes or chargebacks divided by the number of sales. And you have to keep in mind, this is Visa only. So if you have 500 transactions, but 100 of them are MasterCard, then that means there's only 400 Visa. So you have to do number of Visa disputes divided by number of Visa transactions for the current month. And then that will give you your percentage. And obviously it cannot be over 1.5%. And as of January 2026, that number is going to be crunched down to 0.9%. And a couple of more interesting things that they've added is, first of all, I know a lot of, business owners online rely on something called RDR, which is Rapid Dispute Resolution. This is a program to prevent chargebacks by giving merchants and businesses alerts of when somebody will maybe charge back, and then giving the opportunity to the business owner to refund that transaction. Now, what Visa is saying is that you can go ahead and keep that program and refund and avoid, getting a chargeback fee, but they will still count those in the disputes. So if you get, let's say, 40 RDRs, they will count towards your ratio. One little note about that: only the fraud RDRs will count. So to summarize this, any chargebacks that come in will count towards that ratio, and any chargeback alerts through the RDR program that Visa owns that come in as fraud dispute reason codes, those will also count. So the veil has been lifted for merchants who have been relying on RDR to keep them safe and keep them below thresholds. That veil is going to be gone. So you really need to keep in mind that you have to resolve disputes other ways and avoid getting the customer to even, call their bank or issue a refund request and so forth. You have to try to get customers to come to you directly when they need support so you can resolve their issue. Now, another interesting thing about this VAMP program is that Visa really wants to crack down on fraud. So what Visa has done is they've included something else that was never a part of, the dispute process or the chargeback thresholds. What they're saying is that they want card testing to be gone. They want fraudsters to be blocked at the merchant and business level. So if Visa sees that more than 20% of your transactions are due to card testing, they call it the enumeration ratio. So if, let's say, you have 5,000 transactions and all of a sudden you get hit by a fraud ring and they just, start throwing in cards and so forth and testing cards and so forth, and Visa sees that it's over 20% of your transactions that are coming from these, card testing, even if you went and you stopped it and you refunded all the transactions and you called your bank and so forth, Visa says this is irresponsible for you as a merchant, because there are many, many tools out there for business owners online to block these types of attacks. So they're going to penalize you by putting you in this VAMP program if you don't take the necessary steps to protect your business from fraudsters coming in and trying to test cards. Now, if you've had an online business or even if you're new, you should be aware that there's tons of tools within your payment gateway or whatever processor you're using to block specific card testing. For example, you can block certain amount of requests per card number, per IP, per email address. You can say maximum number of transactions per card, 5 per day or 5 per month or whatever the case is. And that will really just block all the obvious fraud attempts or from people testing cards, because they'll just be blocked from your gateway. So if you don't have those tools already in your payment gateway, then please go ahead and do that, because Visa is going to be punishing you very soon if you don't take active measures to block fraud. And if you need help with that, you can contact me or somebody from my team at Direct PayNet. Our gateway, if you're working with us, has these tools, and if you're not, we'll show you how to do it in your gateway. So it's very easy, and it's unfortunate that Visa has to put these rules up there for people to abide and businesses to abide, but it's very easy to block fraud, and they're making it a rule now that if you're not doing it, they're going to penalize you and fine you. Now, one very important point here, and you may think this might not be applicable to you, but it is. So they will start fining merchants who have over 1,000 chargebacks. So the 0.9% is significant. Obviously, you cannot have more than 0.9%, but it's also in conjunction to having 1,000 chargebacks. Now, for most businesses, small to medium size, you're never going to get even close to 1,000 chargebacks, or some don't even get close to 1,000 transactions, right? So you're probably wondering, well, why does this concern me? It does concern you because Visa is inputting some rules for your payment processor. They're called acquirers. So your processor will now have some new rules and stricter rules to abide by. So even if you don't get to the 1,000 chargebacks, or you're not even close, the processor that you're working with will look at their whole portfolio and start seeing who the worst offenders are, and then start shutting down. So you may risk losing your merchant account, losing your payment processing if you seem to be carrying a lot of risk and bringing in a lot of chargebacks. So before this, the rules were a lot higher for processors. Visa has input a rule as of April 2025 for a payment processor as a whole, and we're talking about, millions of transactions, they should not have more than 0.5% of their whole portfolio that are chargebacks. And then as of January next year, that number is going to go down to 0.3%. So you're going to see a lot of payment processors starting to look at their portfolios and seeing which risks they want to take, which risks they don't want to take. And if you seem to be a bad offender or getting a lot of chargebacks and so on and so forth, they may shut you down. And as I said, because RDR and chargeback alerts actually will now count towards that threshold. As an online business owner, if you're counting on that to save your account, it no longer will be applicable to you very soon. So you have to really take measures to lower your chargebacks and lower the amount of chargeback alerts and RDRs that you're getting. Now, Visa decided to roll this out as of April 2025 to Europe because Europeans are already used to using something called 3D Secure. So what that means, as I said, is like a two-factor authentication. So when somebody in Europe goes to buy something online, they get a text message, they have to validate it, and then that puts them through to be able to buy whatever product or service they're looking for online. And what that does is that it prevents a lot of fraud, right? It's hard for somebody to claim this is a fraudulent transaction when they get a code that they input and so forth. So, Visa decided to roll this out in Europe to see how it goes and what the numbers are when they roll it out in Europe, and then they're going to come to North America. So it is possible we may start seeing Visa start asking for or forcing certain payment processors and certain business types to be 3D secure as well in North America. Now, in the past, a lot of North American businesses have tried 3D secure, have tried to put that kind of 2FA on their cart, and it does really kill conversions. Customers don't like it and so forth. So we'll see how this all rolls out. We'll have a couple of months in Europe to see, how things pan out with the new Visa program, but it is coming to North America, and it is something that's coming very soon. Within 6 months, we're going to start seeing these rules apply to US businesses. So we need to be prepared. And you as a business owner, if you're, as I said, relying on RDR to protect you from getting fines from Visa and so forth, that's not going to be applicable. So you should start taking some active measures and some active steps to make sure that your store is secure and your customers are not complaining, and that, obviously you're below that 1% threshold. And now why Visa is doing this is because the RDR program has been very successful. So as I said, the RDR program allows businesses to get an alert from Visa saying, hey, this customer is not happy with their purchase and may charge back. So you refund it so you avoid getting a chargeback or dispute fee, and then the customer gets their money back. And that traditionally has not counted towards your chargeback ratio when it's an RDR, but now it will. And that's because Visa has seen more and more merchants rely on this to protect them from chargebacks, and it's not working and it's not helping prevent fraud. So they really want businesses to take an active role in preventing fraud and to be clear with their customers and so forth. So this is the way that they're rolling it out. And now obviously what's going to happen here is, payment processors are going to start scrutinizing accounts a little bit more. They may be taking less risk. So if you're a high risk business, an online business that has subscriptions, supplements, gambling, or digital courses and so forth, you're going to have a lot less options for payment processing facilities because it's going to be tougher for different payment processors to take on more risk given these new regulations. Now, if you're a US business and you're like, hey, what do I do? How do I protect myself? And what are some steps I can take? Let me simplify this for you. So first of all, as I said, this program is rolling out in Europe it started in April 2025, but it will be coming to the US early 2026. So one thing you need to do is you need to know your data. And what I would do from now on is really calculate it the way that I said earlier: total number of chargebacks divided by total number of transactions for Visa only. And keep in mind, when I say total number of chargebacks, you also need to include any RDR alerts you received that came in for fraud reason codes. So that will push up your ratio. And if you see that, you're over 0.5% to 0.6%, you need to start getting that lower and lower. And now you're probably wondering, why am I saying 0.5%? The reason I say that is because payment processors will start seeing anybody over 0.5% as higher risk and may start assessing that they don't want to work for you. So, beware if your thresholds are over 0.5%, it is something that you really need to pay attention to make sure that you don't lose your payment processing facilities, that you don't have any issues with your business and so forth. So take active steps to lower that. Now, what can you do to lower that? First of all, if 3DS is an option for you, I would add it right away. And as I said, this is just basically, it generates a code goes to the customer's cell phone and they need to input that code into your checkout page in order to buy the transaction. If you have large tickets, this might be a great thing for you to do to prevent some fraud. Obviously, if you have lower ticket, it might not be the best option for a US market right now. As I said earlier, another thing you want to do is prevent obvious fraud. So go into your gateway settings, whether you're working with us at DirectPayNet, you're working with Stripe, you're working with Shopify Payments, all of these payment gateways and all of these processors have tools that you need to turn on to prevent obvious fraud. So maximum number of transactions that you allow per card number, per IP, per email address, all that should be turned on. And don't think that it's automatically turned on because you're working with something like Shopify Payments. They don't turn these on. You need to go in there and manually set the rules of what you allow, what you don't allow. And if you don't, and this happens to you, then you will be fined, right? You cannot claim ignorance, unfortunately. You need to, understand that these are things that you need to do as a business owner. And unfortunately, if you don't, you'll be fined and you may lose your payment processing. So as I said, you have been warned. Go in there and look at your fraud settings and add things that make sense for your business. Now, your payment processor may also start sending you some information, emails, updates, and so forth about the new VAMP program. Pay attention to that. They may also have some changes in their appetite for risk and which industries they accept. If you all of a sudden see that, you're selling supplements and they no longer accept supplements, it would be the right time to start looking and shopping for another payment processor, or at least getting a backup. As I've said multiple times, this is a very important part of your business, right? Payment processing, accepting credit cards, and so forth is a huge part of owning an online business. And if you can't accept it, then you're out of business. So you should already have a backup, but if you don't, and then you get some kind of notification that, there's been a policy change or they're updating their rules and so forth, you should be immediately getting yourself another backup solution or another payment processor for your business. Now, a lot of online businesses still have, phone sales teams and phone customer service and so forth. You need to educate your team. So you need to make sure that your team understands this is very serious and that you need to prevent chargebacks and you need to prevent disputes. So educate your team and coach them on how they can, resolve customer disputes on the phone or by email and so forth, just to avoid as many customers as possible going either the RDR route or the dispute route. Now, this all sounds super scary, and I understand as a business owner, there's so many things that you need to be doing and responsibilities that you need to be aware of. So it is important, obviously, for you to understand that these are rules and regulations that are coming out. But if you're doing everything properly and you're running an honest business, this really shouldn't be an issue. And especially if you work with a team like mine at DirectPayNet, we'll help you understand these rules, navigate these rules, and make sure that you don't get caught with your pants down when these rules come into play, either right now, I guess, if you're in Europe, and in North America in a couple of months from now. So keep in mind, this is not, going to end anybody's business unless obviously you're being dishonest with your customers. But these are things that you need to understand as a business owner. You need to also know your data. You need to know how many chargebacks you have, how many transactions are coming in from Visa, what your ratios are. So really understand your data, ensure that you're updating your team on these new practices, training your team to handle customer disputes and customer calls, and I think you'll be fine. But if you need any more help or if you have any more questions about the new regulations for the Visa Chargeback program, feel free to drop me a line down below. I'd be happy to help, and I'll be doing more updates as the program becomes a little bit more well-known in North America. And as I said, I work with businesses in Europe and in North America. So if you're in Europe, you should already know this and you should already be doing this. And if you're in North America, you should start preparing for this. So I'm wishing you a great day. And if you have any questions, don't forget to ask them down below. And please subscribe and share for more amazing content about your business.